Civilian Conservation Corps. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, was one of the first New Deal programs. It was a public works project to promote environmental conservation and to build good citizens. Close to the heart of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the CCC combined his interest in conservation and universal service for youth. He believed that this civilian tree army would relieve the rural unemployed and keep youth off the city's street corners. The CCC operated under the Army's control. By September 1935, over 500,000 young men had lived in CCC camps, most staying from 6 months to a year. The work focused on soil conservation and reforestation. Most important, the men planted millions of trees on land made barren from fires, natural erosion, or lumbering. In fact, the CCC was responsible for over half of the reforestation, public and private, done in the nation's history. Corps men also dug canals and ditches, built over 30,000 wildlife shelters, stocked rivers and lakes with nearly 1 billion fish, restored historic battlefields, and cleared beaches and campgrounds. Although professing a non-discriminatory policy, the CCC failed to give a fair share of work to blacks, especially in the South. But in spite of rigid segregation and hiring quotas, black participation reached 10% by 1936. Works Progress Administration. Let me scroll. In April 1935, the WPA was established as a means of creating government jobs for some of the nation's many unemployed. The WPA employed more than 8.5 million persons on 1.4 million public projects before it was disbanded in 1943. The program chose work that would not interfere with private enterprise, especially vast public building projects like construction of highways, bridges, and dams. The careers of several important American artists, including Jackson Pollock and William de Kooning, were launched thanks to WPA donations. Although its scale was unprecedented, the WPA never managed to serve more than a quarter of the nation's unemployed. Its programs were extremely popular, though, and contributed significantly to Roosevelt's landslide re-election in 1936. The Social Security Administration. A committee led by Secretary of Labor Frances Perkins, the first female to ever hold a cabinet position, wrote the Social Security Act. In addition to providing old age retirement incomes, the legislation created a safety net for Americans in distress. Unemployment insurance was part of the plan to be funded by employers. The federal government also offered to match state funds for the blind and for job training for the physically disabled. Unmarried women with dependent children also received funds under the Social Security Act. Roosevelt and his advisors knew that the Social Security Act was not perfect. Like other experiments, he hoped the law would set the groundwork for a system that could be refined over time. The payments that retirees received were very low, below poverty level standards in most cases. Still, Roosevelt knew the plan was revolutionary. For the first time, the federal government accepted permanent responsibility for assisting people in need. It paved the way for future legislation that would redefine the relationship between the American people and their government. Tennessee Valley Authority. Even by Depression standards, the Tennessee Valley was economically miserable in 1933. 30% of the population was affected by malaria, and the average income was only $639 per year, with some families surviving on as little as $100 per year. Much of the land had been farmed too hard for too long, eroding and reducing the soil. TVA was designed to update the region. TVA developed fertilizers, taught farmers ways to improve crop yields, and helped replant forests, control forest fires, and improve habitat for fish and wildlife. The most dramatic change in Valley life came from TVA-generated electricity. Electric lights and modern home appliances made life easier and farms more productive. Electricity also drew industries into the region, providing desperately needed jobs. None of this was easy. The development of dams displaced more than 15,000 families. This created anti-TVA sentiment in some rural communities. Many local landowners were suspicious of government agencies, but TVA introduced new farming methods into traditional farming communities by blending in and finding local champions. A Tennessee farmer would not take advice from an official in a suit and tie, so TVA officials had to find leaders in the community and convince them that crop rotation and the judicious application of fertilizers could restore soil fertility. Once they had convinced the leaders, the rest followed. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, was created under the Banking Act of 1933, also known as the Glass-Steagall Act, with the responsibility to insure bank deposits in banks from loss in the event of a bank failure and to regulate certain banking practices. It was established after the collapse of many American banks during the initial years of the Great Depression. The FDIC became a permanent government agency through the Banking Act of 1935. So your assignment. The New Deal graphic organizer. First, type out what was the New Deal. You can use the internet or your online book. Number 2, what were the 3 R's and what did they stand for? In the bigger part of the assignment. New Deal programs. The New Deal changed the role of the government to a more active participant in solving problems. The New Deal influenced the public's belief in the responsibility of government to deliver public services, to intervene in the economy, and to act in ways that promote the general welfare. Many of the New Deal programs did this. However, not everyone supported the New Deal. First, it was expensive and many people did not believe that the government had the power to do some of the things it was doing. Second, not all of the programs worked. FDR was experimenting with his New Deal, and some of his experiments failed or were unpopular. Read about some of the major New Deal programs and fill out the organizer below for 10 points. Then on the back, draw a scene from one of the New Deal programs worth 5 points. So here you type out the program, so FDIC. You explain whether it was relief, recovery, or reform using the 3 R's from here that you researched. Oh, calm down. Then explain the purpose. So who was this program helping and how? And if you want to, you can just highlight that in a copy of the descriptions and send that to me. That's fine. But here you need to type out, do you think the programs were successful and why or why not? So that would be in your own words.